Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I still haven't quite recovered from COVID, which you can probably hear by my voice. I still get quite some bad coughs that I will have to edit out, and my nose is swelling every day. And I don't know why. It just doesn't stop, and every night I use like a spray and it gets better, and then every afternoon it starts up again. So that's just my life right now. But I still wanted to come here and give you a quick wrap up of the books that I've read in October. Now, October has not been the amazing reading month that I wanted it to be. Yeah, no, it was very busy. I had a ton of migraines, and then at the end I got COVID. So yeah, it wasn't great, but there were still some good books in there that I wanted to shout out to you. So the first book I finished, I kind of feel like I mentioned it at the end of my last wrap up, but I'm just not sure, so I'm gonna mention it again. But the first book that I finished was my audiobook, American Mermaid by Julia Langbein. There will be a reading vlog where I talk all about this book very soon, but this is a literary fiction that makes you believe that there would be some horror in there, and it focuses on a school teacher who wrote a book about a mermaid who becomes an eco-warrior, and this book is now supposed to become a movie, and we're following that journey. It's really not that great. I gave it 3 stars, and unfortunately I do not really recommend. Then the next book I finished was much better. And that was A House with Good Bones by Kingfisher. Again, I listened to this one on audio and I really enjoyed it. In this one, we are following a young woman who moves back in with her mom for a couple of weeks because of something that happens at work for her. She is a scientist, she studies bugs, and so she's back in her childhood home, but her mother starts acting strangely. And this is kind of like a haunted house story light, so it's not really that creepy, but I had a lot of fun just reading a book by Kingfisher. I love her writing style, I love her characters. The lead female character not only is a scientist, but she's also fat, and she talks about her experiences with that as it comes up in the novel, and I just really enjoyed it. I really liked this book, even though it could have been creepier, it could have been a little bit more horror, and so in the end I gave it 4 stars. I'm sorry if you can hear the cat. Honestly, between my voice and the noises of the cat, this is an amazing video. Then I finished an ebook that I got through my library, and that was How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady, Hendrix. So we're sticking with the haunted houses for this one. I had heard quite mixed things about this book, but because I could get it through my library, I decided to just take a leap of faith and trust Grady Hendrix, and I did not regret that. In this book, we're following a young woman. She has a small daughter, and she gets a call from her estranged brother who tells her that their parents are dead. They had a car accident, and so she goes back home for the funeral, and she thinks that she will inherit the house as well. And so it deals with this childhood home again, and with family secrets, and with the very horrible relationship of brother and sister, and we're kind of going deeper into that. Now, you've probably heard that there is puppets in this book, so if you're afraid of dolls and puppets, then this might be the horror book for you. I did really enjoy it. I am quite glad that I read the audiobook, that I did not read the audiobook, because I've heard mixed things about the narration. I don't know if I would have liked it as an audiobook, but as an ebook it worked very well for me. I really like that while it has like genuinely creepy moments in there, it also has an underlying theme of sadness, of grief, and it is also chaptered by the like 5 stages of grief that you've probably heard of. and I liked how it all made sense in the end and what like the overall conclusion was. So I gave this one 4 stars as well. And oh boy, did Grady Hendrix make me angry with his book. Like, he can portray characters in a way that you just want to hate them. Then I finished my next audiobook, and that was A House of Roots and Ruin by Erin A. Craig. This is the kind of sequel to A House of Salt and Sorrows, which I really enjoyed. It was the first book of the author that I had read, and I thought that I would really like this second installment as well. In the first book, we follow 12 sisters, and it's a retelling of that fairy tale with the 12 sisters, the 12 dancing princesses, I think. And in this one, we are following the youngest sister. So she doesn't really remember what happened in the first book because she was so small. But she wants to be a painter. She wants to go out into the world and see what's up. And her sisters are very protective of her. But she gets an offer to go to this family estate and paint the heir of the family. And so she decides this is her chance, and she goes. In this one, there is a lot of love story, and unfortunately not quite so much like darkness and horror. Our main character can see ghosts, which sounds more creepy than it is, to be honest. And what I liked about this book is that we get a love interest who uses a wheelchair, which is not something that is very common in books today. So I really appreciated that, even though I wasn't always happy with the way this was explored, and also some of the abilities that this character turned out to have later on in the book. But I think it was entertaining, but I just expected way more from it, and since I don't really read a lot of romance, it just wasn't my thing. So in the end I gave it 3 stars, and this is the beginning of a duology, and I don't know if I will read the second book. Like, there is very clear setup for more in the end, and I don't know if I really want to read that. Then I finished another audiobook, and this one was Our Last Echoes by Kate Ellis Marshall. This is the kind of sequel to Rules for Vanishing. I really loved Rules for Vanishing last year, and so I was really intrigued to read Our Last Echoes this year. And I hadn't really heard a lot of people mention it, so I went in with lower expectations, but it worked really well for me. In this one, we are following a young girl who is an orphan, and she is now 18. She's out of the system, and she wants to find out whether her mother is really dead. And to find that out, she goes to this very remote island in Alaska where she has reason to believe that her mother was last seen alive. And this island only has a couple of like bird watching people. I don't know how to pronounce it probably in English, but she decides to be an apprentice to these scientists. So she has a reason to be on the island, so there won't be any suspicions. And she starts investigating her mother's death. She also meets a boy there who is the son of the like head researcher woman, and he has 2 moms, so we have a little bit of diversity in there as well. And then we also get a character that we've met in Rules for Vanishing, one of the side characters, who pops up in this one and is a little bit more important here. And with the ending, we also get this hint that that storyline might continue while the main story of this book is completely finished within this book. So I really enjoyed that. We do have this mixed media feel to the story again that we already had in Rules for Vanishing, and because of that I say it is kind of a sequel, even though the like main story has nothing to do with the first one. Now I think if you liked the kind of horror that you have in Rules for Vanishing, you will probably also like the horror in this book. It is very weird. It has connections to the horror of the first book, so there is like an underlying theme, what's going on with these things that are happening. We have weird bird and body horror. And yeah, I think that Kate Ellis Marshall just creates very visual scenarios that you can see, especially because we have this like mixed media style. And I really loved it. I gave it 4 stars. So you might be wondering why I finished so many audiobooks and no physical reads. And that is because of this beauty right here. This is The Turn of the Screw and Other Ghost Stories by Henry James. This is the book that I promised myself I would finally finish this year. I bought this after watching The Haunting of Bly Manor, and then I started it, and then it just ended up lying on my shelves for years and years. So I finally read this. We have a couple of stories in here, but the major thing is The Turn of the Screw, which is a novella, and then we have a couple of short stories going along with that. Now, I did enjoy the novella, I guess because I really loved Bly Manor so much, and it was interesting to kind of see where some of those ideas came from. But I think that the novella is also more entertaining than some of these ghost stories that are in here. Some I really did not like at all. Others I thought were kind of interesting, like the second to last one, The Third Person. I really liked this one as well. It was really fun. And with these stories, you can definitely see some of the inspiration for the show. It's not only The Turn of the Screw, but also some others. Like, for example, one of the stories is called Owen Wingrave, and Wingrave is the name of the family in the show. So that was interesting to see, but I really did not vibe with the writing style. I just had such a hard time understanding Henry James on a sentence level. So that's also why it took me so long to read. And in the end, I gave this whole book 3 stars and The Turn of the Screw by itself 4 stars. And then you might have guessed it, I finished another audiobook. And that book was Yellow Jessamine by Caitlin Starling. This is also just a novella, and I had access to it for free, so I decided to give it a go. Again, I had heard mixed things, and Gothic tales are just hit or miss for me. Like, I either love them or I just don't. And this one luckily was one that I really enjoyed. I really liked this one. It is very disorienting at the beginning, but you just have to go with the flow for a while. And I just loved the dark themes that we have in here. So basically in this book we are following a woman. It's not really clear how old she is, but I would say probably like in her 30s. And this is set in a fantasy world where we're looking at a city that is now completely isolated. So there was some kind of a revolution, and this was the capital city, and it's the only one that hasn't fallen yet. And so things are not great in this city. And they have a port, and they are very much reliant on trade. And so we have these different families who are merchants, and we're looking at this one family where this woman is basically the only one left. All of her family have died, and we're looking at her situation when a mysterious sickness hits that starts on one of her ships, and it seems to have something to do with her. And she's a poisoner, so she's a very intriguing character, almost like a villain. But I think you can absolutely see where she's coming from, which I always enjoy when I can still relate to these dark characters. And I think if you like something like The Lost Apothecary, but you want it much darker and with fantasy elements, then you need to read Yellow Jessamine. Also, it's sapphic. And yeah, I just really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. And that was the last book that I finished in the month. So for Halloween, I wasn't feeling that great. I was in the middle of COVID. I hadn't read for a while, so I decided to read a short story, and that was The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe as preparation for the new TV show. And it was fine. It was interesting. It was definitely not what I expected at all. In this one, we are following a man who gets a letter or a missive from a childhood friend that he hasn't seen for many, many years, or so it feels. And he goes to his estate, the house of Usher, and he finds his childhood friend and his sister both not very well, and he decides to spend some time with his childhood best friend to kind of just give him some solace. And while he's there, the sister dies from her illness, and then there is a stormy night. I don't know what to say about this story because it's like very short, but it was definitely different from what I expected. I've so far only watched the first episode of the show, so I also found it interesting to see what was brought into the show from the story. But yeah, we'll see about that. Overall, I gave the story 3 stars. I just expected a lot more from it than what was actually there. And so that was my very pitiful October. I hope that you had a much better time reading some spooky books. Let me know what your favorite read of October was. I would love to hear about that. I will talk to you soon, hopefully when I get my voice back. Bye!